Hi everyone, we're going to get started in just a minute or two, just as we admit all the people in the waiting room. And Joel, if you could just let me know when you think we've got to a good number of people and there's not any more people waiting.
Sure. At this point, there's no one in the room. We're at 35 participants.
Great, that's pretty close then.
Yeah. So whenever you're ready, I think.
Okay, and you can still see my slides, okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Just as a reminder, folks, if you can make sure that you're muted during the presentations, that way we cut down on any background noise. But when there is time for questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or put the questions into chat. So good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Maine Contemporary Archives Tech Lightning Talks. I'm Matthew Revitt, I'm the University Archivist at the University of Maine, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's webinar. So this session is one of several professional development and skill sharing opportunities organised by the Maine Contemporary Archives Group, a group of cultural heritage professionals from across the state who first started meeting back in 2020 to share our experiences of building archives to document the responses to COVID-19 in our communities. Since then, with support from the Maine State Library and the IMLS funds that they received through the CARES Act, we've expanded our mission to foster collaboration, to collect, preserve, and provide access to materials related to Maine community members' experiences of current events. The group meets monthly on the first Thursday to discuss local projects and host skill sharing sessions like today's. One of our current projects is collecting content for a then and now exhibit that will feature historical items such as old photos paired with contemporary items from your community. Your institution can provide a series of images of popular places for community members to use and build upon. We'll put a link to the submission form for this exhibit into the chat, and I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to contribute content to the exhibit. In today's webinar, you're going to be learning about archives tech for digital preservation, content management, and online displays. Each of our presenters will get just 7 minutes to discuss a specific tool, covering what you can use it for, what it costs, how easy it's to use, and along the way, you'll also learn about some of the pros and cons of each tool. There'll be lots of opportunities for audience questions as we go along. I would also encourage you to have the handout that was sent to all the registrants open as we go along as well. We've attempted to group the presentations by the general function of the tool that I'll be discussing, with our first two presenters discussing tools for preserving digital content, which is very appropriate on World Digital Preservation Day, which I didn't even know was a thing until this morning. Our first presenter is Meagan Doyle, digital archivist at Bowdoin College, who will be presenting on the web archiving tool, ArchiveIT. Take it away, Meagan.
Hi, everyone. So as Matthew said, I'm Meagan Doyle. I'm the digital archivist at the Bowdoin College Library, and I'm excited to talk with you all about ArchiveIT today. Next slide. So before diving into the specifics about ArchiveIT, I wanted to give you a sense of our landscape. For some of you, these will all be unfamiliar names, so I apologize, but for others, it'll provide some helpful context. We use ArchivesSpace as our content management tool. We use Digital Commons to provide access to digitized publications, oral histories, and scholarship. And we use JSTOR Forum to provide access to digitized photos. LibSafe Go is a really new product for us that we're in the process of implementing right now, but we're going to use it as a digital preservation repository. And then we, of course, have ArchiveIT for web archiving. And I know other folks will talk about some of these later on today. But next slide. So what is ArchiveIT? What is web archiving? So if you've heard of the Internet Archive or the Wayback Machine, this is using some of the same technology. This ArchiveIT is a service, a product of the Internet Archive. It uses Wayback Machine technology, and it enables you to capture and then replay websites from a particular moment in time. So then it allows you or your researchers to browse archived websites, even if they're no longer on the live web or earlier versions of a website that now looks very different. And it's an annual paid subscription model that includes what I think is really good tech support as tech support goes. So next slide. I very quickly, these are some of the services that ArchiveIT offers. So the top two are the web archiving tools. Bowdoin has ArchiveIT Pro, which is their sort of flagship original service. And there is, we pay $4,800 a year for a 1/4 terabyte of data storage on ArchiveIT Pro, which compared to what we pay for some of our other subscriptions is not too bad, but I know that could be really steep for certain organizations. So I wanted to mention that ArchiveIT Basic exists. It's built on the same technology and it's deeply discounted. I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but maybe more accessible to institutions with, yes, 1997. No, I have a few screen grabs from our older website in here. So the basic edition built on the same technology allows for sort of doing a lot of the same things, but at a lower cost. Wayback Fill is a service that we've used and I'll talk more about later. The other three I won't touch on because I don't have much time and I'm not as familiar with those, but just so that you're aware that there are redirection, snapshot, and preservation services as part of their suite of offerings. Next slide. Thank you. So we've been an ArchiveIT partner at Bowdoin since 2016. Our collecting really started in earnest in 2017 when my position, digital archivist, was created. So that, again, that $4,800 a year gets us 256 gigabytes per year of data storage or of data sort of budget to collect websites, and we find that that size works really well for us. We have about 1 terabyte total of data collected to date. And our primary focus is bowdoin.edu, right? The main website of Bowdoin College, and also official social media accounts, which I'll talk more about those later. In terms of just staffing, because I'm always interested in how much time do people have to actually spend on this? I'm the one person who uses our instance of ArchiveIT, and I spend maybe 10 to 15% of my time on this. I would encourage you, the public archiveit.org page does have anyone who has public ArchiveIT collections, they're available through that page if you're just curious about what the researcher experience is like. For the sort of looking back and browsing through archived web pages. Next slide. So we were asked to touch on our favorite feature, and mine is definitely this one called Wayback Fill service, which was an additional one-time fee to do it, but that is how we have the 1997 through 2017, sort of this long history of the Bowdoin website residing alongside our more curated archived content since we became ArchiveIT subscribers, partners. Which is really just to say our researchers now, if they're wanting to do research on the Bowdoin website, they don't now have to go to the Wayback Machine and our instance of ArchiveIT. Everything resides alongside each other. They can search and browse it all in one place, and that's just been a really great service for us from sort of like an access and research perspective. And then the next slide. We were also asked about our biggest frustration, and that's definitely been social media capture. Anyone who's an ArchiveIT subscriber and tries to capture social media knows that this is not something that does it actually does Twitter pretty well, but Instagram and Facebook, for example, it doesn't do. Matthew, if you want to click again just to show this silly little video, which is not that important, but it shows scrolling through all of my failed attempts at capturing Instagram over the last couple of years. This is something that ArchiveIT is aware of and working on, but they've just sort of been aware of and working on it for a couple of years, and we've had to resort to other tools for capturing this what's really important content for us, because a lot of student life is happening online and on social media, and that's just not something currently that we're able to use this tool for. Yeah, so I think that's my last slide. Yeah, thank you. I kind of breezed through that. I know I didn't cover a lot, but I want to leave plenty of time for questions. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Meagan. And just there will be time for questions after our next presenter. So we're going to cover the two digital preservation ones questions together. So feel free to put them in the chat though if you think of them, and then we'll get to them after our next presenter. So our next presenter is Joey Collard, who is Head of Library Technologies and Innovation at the University of Maine's Vogler Library. Joe is going to be discussing the digital preservation tool Archivematica. Thanks, Joey.
Probably help if I unmute. All right, you can go to the next slide. All right, so I just wanted to put a disclaimer out there that I'm not an archivist or librarian or anything like that. I have a very, very heavy IT background, but I have researched and written on issues of digital preservation. Nothing like professionally per se, but like I touched upon at my thesis, I've done a whole bunch of reports for other entities across campus. So I just want to throw that out there so you know where I'm coming from. All right, next. All right, so Archivematica, its primary function is digital preservation. And for those who don't know, just real quick, digital preservation is more than just doing a backup copy of a file or even a backup of a backup, right? It does all kinds of, provides all kinds of other services as well, right? Such as it'll do virus scans, file format conversion if needed. So it can take old files and convert them into more updated files. So like an old PDF from like the 1990s can be updated to a new, you know, more archive-friendly format like PDF-A, right? It can do metadata creation, file hashing, does fixity checks, it can do provenance tracing, and then it can actually create packages that are designed for long-term storage, as well as packages for user access too, that you can put on your websites or wherever repository you choose, right? And it does a lot more. And I put a screenshot on the right there that shows a bunch of the other things that it's doing. It does even more than that, right? And you can expand each one of those, and it has tons of other things that it's doing in those. So it does a whole lot. So again, digital preservation, more than just copies, right? So right now at Vogler, we're using Archivematica, not so much to actually digitally preserve, as much as we're using it to assess our current digital preservation workflows and capabilities. We haven't had a digital preservation system really beyond just doing file copies, right? So we're looking to actually develop something more robust. And so we're using Archivematica as a tool to do that, and also to just develop better, you know, digital preservation policies all around. All right, next. So cost. Okay, so Archivematica is open source, which means that it costs no money as far as licensing is concerned. However, you will have to pay for any hardware, training, backup support, etc., right? Because you're now running the whole show yourself. With that said, if you do self-host, they do provide paid for support, and there's different tiers of that, and there's no single price. It's something you have to work out with them based on how much support you think you're going to need. However, Artifactual does offer a hosted solution, which starts at $10,000 a year. And then you pay for storage on top of that. And then the storage pricing is also tiered depending on how much you use. So in general, the more storage you need, the less you're going to pay per terabyte. Next. All right, so they asked about ease of use, and I would say that as far as the folks using Archivematica to ingest materials and to create these digital preservation packages, I would say it's moderately easy. There's not a whole lot to it. You basically, you put in a transfer name, you browse to the folder you want to preserve, and then you hit start transfer, right? And it can start doing all sorts of things. Learning what each of these steps does can be a little bit more difficult. I think the hardest part is actually just the planning side. How do you want to preserve everything? When can you declare that something's officially digitally preserved according to your organization, and then configuring Archivematica to work within that framework. The server administration side, if you decide to self-host, far more complicated, very, very complicated, right? You're going to need advanced Linux skills. You're going to need to know some programming skills, some database administration skills. There is documentation online. However, I have found that it's somewhat subpar and sometimes missing vital steps. However, there's a really good Archivematica Google group provided by Artifactual, and some of the Artifactual staff will actually come in and answer the questions, or other community members who have figured out solutions will also respond to you. So that's been very, very helpful and much appreciated. Next. All right, so one of my favorite features is the ability to automate workflows depending on items that you're ingesting, or just depending on what you want to do. And so you can set up kind of an unlimited number of workflows. So you can say, for all videos, I want to do, steps number XYZ, right? So maybe you want to skip virus scanning for some reason. I don't suggest it, but you could for videos, right? They're huge. It takes a while, right? Can be resource intensive, right? And maybe you want to automatically upload that package to, say, Kaltura or to YouTube or something like that, right? There are ways to manage that or set up these workflows. You could change it based on content type, so video, documents, photos, etc. Or you can do it based on, this is a town report, so I want to take this kind of step, whereas this is a county report, so I want to preserve it differently, right, using a different workflow. So you can set all that up beforehand, and then when you go to do your transfer, you just tell it, I want to do this kind of transfer, and then it'll automatically do a lot of that for you, saving tons of time, especially if you're like us and you have terabytes and terabytes of data that need to be preserved. All right, next. All right, so one of the biggest frustrations is that Archivematica doesn't play well with some distributed file systems. And by that, I mean things like SharePoint or Google Drive. As you can see down here, I selected one of our SharePoint repositories as a place that I just want to pull files to ingest, right? Files that we want to digitally preserve. However, nothing's showing up, right? Whereas like an hour before, everything was showing up perfectly fine, right? And so anything that deals with authentication systems that have to happen somewhat frequently, whether that might be every few hours or every few days, right? It tends to lose those. And then it takes manual intervention to go in and to fix that issue. All right, next. All right, and then that's just a bunch of links to resources for Archivematica if you're interested. The end.
Thank you, Joey. Thank you, both of you. So any questions for either Meagan or Joey? And I'm going to just check the chat to see if anything's coming through. And feel free to unmute yourselves if you'd prefer to do that. I know sometimes typing into chat can be kind of a bother, so feel free to unmute yourselves. So we do have a question, actually. Let me just pull it over here. Have you connected Archivematica with any of UMaine's other systems like Digital Commons or ArchiveSpace?
So, yes and no. So I was able to integrate it with ArchiveSpace, and that's actually a built-in feature with Archivematica. However, I haven't tested it myself, so I don't know how well it plays with ArchiveSpace. I'm not sure if some of our archivists here or librarians have actually done that themselves or not. Digital Commons, I'm not sure if there's a built-in way to do that. One of the nice things about Archivematica is even though they don't necessarily have a built-in officially supported solution or integration to a system, oftentimes there are third-party apps or community provided applications that you can install on the server that will provide that integration for you. For instance, SharePoint, that's not something that Archivematica itself officially supports. However, there are third-party apps that you can use that allow you to extend the functionality of Archivematica, right? And so that's somewhat where that advanced kind of skills set comes in so that you can implement some of these additional features.
We did have another question, Joey. Do you know if there are any regular or recorded training sessions with Archivematica?
I don't know if there's any regular, actually, I don't think they provide any, at least not from Artifactual. They do provide training, but it is paid for. I think oftentimes if you get a service contract with them, part of that is they allow a certain amount of training. It might be like one training session per year. Again, it kind of depends on how you set up your contract with them. However, I believe there are videos online that kind of go through some of the steps. They also provide a sandbox online that you can go and use. You can't use any of your own data for it, but they have a bunch of test files where you can go through the system. And they also have like a step-by-step tutorial on how to use it. And it uses, like, you do it side by side with the sandbox to kind of just go through and just learn it a little bit, at least get somewhat familiar with it.
Another question we have, Joey, is can you use Archivematica to digitize media materials such as tape cassettes, or is Archivematica strictly used for documents and images?
Archivematica can actually handle all kinds of file formats. Exactly what it can and can't, I'm not 100% sure. They probably have something on their site. Tape cassettes might be possible, but I wouldn't say that it's through Archivematica itself, as much as you can set up probably some kind of workflow within the operating system itself. And then Archivematica, like, as long as it can read a directory of some sort, it can access things like that. So if you were to say, copy the tapes to a directory, you automate that workflow, and then might be able to detect, items put in there and then ingest those automatically for you.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, is that the actual digitizing of it would be done outside of Archivematica, but then Archivematica could then handle the files that were made as a result of that digitization.
Right. So again, and that's important to throw as Archivematica is not a digitization platform, right? It's just strictly preservation, right?
One question I actually had for Meagan is, do you know if the Wayback Fill, is that a service that you can buy just on its own?
I don't think that you could. I don't know that for sure. It's an interesting question, but because the Wayback Fill currently works, or at least my understanding is that you are taking whatever exists for a given URL in the Wayback Machine and then bringing that to reside alongside your existing sort of partner page that comes along with being a subscriber and a partner with ArchiveIT. So whether I'm assuming what you're saying is, like, could we just sort of like have that partner page and have everything that's from the Wayback Machine, but not have to worry about creating new, sort of curating or creating new web archives? And I don't know. That is an interesting idea, but I haven't heard of it before.
Thanks.
I have a question for Meagan too.
Sure.
So on your slide with ArchiveIT, you said that you have a 256 gig a year data budget, that you currently have like 1 terabyte or so on there. Are you actually charged for that 1 terabyte, or is it you're allowed a 256 and then as your storage? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, to interrupt you, but it's 256 a year that you're paying for, and then it's as so far there's no sort of like additional fee for how much you're storing year to year. It's just your annual subscription covers, you know, sort of all of the suite of services and tech support and everything, and 256 additional gigabytes a year of captured web archives. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
I think so. So basically you're allotted a certain amount of, you know, ingress data, right? But you're not really charged for storage per se.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. And you can always, of course, you won't be surprised to hear that you can always up the amount of your data budget for a fee.
All right. Thanks.
Paul's got a really good question actually, and it's one actually I was thinking of as well. Is Meagan, how do you decide what sites to archive? Is it just everything on bowdoin.edu, or do you have to be a bit more selective?
That is a great question. Thank you. I have a web archives collecting statement that we put together to sort of guide our web archives collecting a little bit. It's not quite a collections policy or collection development policy, but it ties into something like that, and I'll link to it in a moment. But basically, for bowdoin.edu, we're trying to get as much as we possibly can. We have had to limit the amount of video that we capture because specifically our communications department and the news items that go out sometimes post with multi-hour or hour-long videos, and we don't have the data budget to be collecting videos in that way. And we'll probably get those videos another way eventually in our digital collections. So, but yeah, so in terms of bowdoin.edu, we're trying to get as much of it as we can. And then the official websites, the official social media accounts, once we can actually do that, are also a priority. In terms of anything else, anything that's not those two things, it is we have an interest in collecting things that are created by students or that reflect student life, but it's not something we've actually been able to accomplish yet, and in part because social media capture is not functioning, and that's where we see a lot of, like I said, that sort of student life happening. Let me know whether that answers your question, but I'm also going to find this form to pop the link into the chat.
Great, thank you everyone. And I encourage, if people think of questions after the fact, we do have time, and Paul says thank you. Meagan, we do have time at the end for more questions that occur to you as well. So this isn't your only opportunity to ask questions. So we're going to move on now to two presenters who are going to be discussing systems for describing and managing content, both physical and digital. First up is going to be Beth Russell, who is archivist and special collections librarian at the University of Maine. And Beth will be covering the content management tool ArchiveSpace. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks, Matthew, and hello to everybody. So we use ArchiveSpace as our content management system. We can catalog in it. We can use the public interface so people can search in it, and we also use it for tracking our accessions. And we also use some of it for digital objects, but I'll get to that in a minute. So while we use it as our management system, it also can enable generation of EAD documents and MARC records. Also, we can create mods, Dublin Core and METs, but we use just the EAD and the XML function. So once we get a catalog record finished, we can export a finding aid, and we usually post it onto Digital Commons, which is our institutional repository. And the MARC records we import into OCLC and then downloaded it into our Ursus. So it is, can I have the next page, please? So it is open source. However, that doesn't get you anything. There are some institutions that have the technical knowledge and the IT resources to support that. And we did start out with hosting it ourselves. However, as the updates got more and more involved and complicated, our IT staff got less and less interested in supporting it. So we eventually contracted with one of the registered service providers that work with ArchiveSpace, and we are now with Lyrasis. And there are costs, obviously, associated with using a vendor, but the pricing depends on your institution size and your collection size, so that varies. We also are a member of the ArchiveSpace community, and that is not required to use this ArchiveSpace, but it's recommended. So it helps with the ongoing development of the application, but it also gives you access to a multitude of training resources and videos and the user manual. And it also gives you access to the community forum, which is a very engaged community of users, some of whom have worked on the development, and almost any question you have, you're going to get some help from them. You can also get help from the ArchiveSpace management team. And with our contract with Lyrasis, we also get technical support from them. And they've been outstanding anytime we have any technical issues, or if we want to customize anything like that. And the ArchiveSpace price is, if you want to become a member, it's generally based on your JSTOR number. So I've got a couple of screenshots here. This one that we're looking at now is a collection record, and you can't, if I was able to scroll down, you'd see all the aspects of information that you can enter. But if you look over on the left, you can see basic information, languages, that whole list there. Those are all the different files, information that you can add. And if you see the blue numbers over to the right of that list, you can see how much we've entered into each of those things. So we have 17 subjects for this collection. There are only a few fields that are required. So title, a unique identifier, and the level of description. So this is pretty standard for cataloging. And then up in the middle third, you can see the Gardner family papers with the sort of a blue highlight on the collection. That gives a list of all the folders that we've cataloged, and you can open each one of these carets and you can see the folder titles. Next slide, please. So I find this pretty easy to use, and I think we haven't had any trouble with our students using it as well. And I think it's, if you're comfortable with using a computer, you can basically be trained on this pretty quickly. This is one of our tools that's in the system called rapid data entry. And so it allows you to enter folder titles quickly, and you can customize the display. Here it's giving you everything that you can add, but we don't require everything. So those things that we're not going to have people fill out, we can just blank them out. And if it's a repeating file, if you click on it and it's blue, it will repeat for each line that you add. And that's pretty good for entering things quickly. There's also a couple templates that you can use that are Excel templates, and you can fill those out and download big batches at a time. And we sometimes use that as well if people are more comfortable with using a spreadsheet. And if any problems arise, there's training videos and documentation from both ArchiveSpace and Lyrasis. I don't think, to this point, we haven't discovered if there's a limited number of users or not. We have every staff member and every volunteer and student and intern that we've had, we have accounts for them, and you can either activate or deactivate them. but we haven't hit a limit yet, and I don't think there is one. You can also grant different permissions to students or volunteers or different staff members, depending on what they need and what they don't need. And that's helpful because you can grant someone just, reader access, and they're not going to mess up any of your records. So, which is great. And then we also have what ArchiveSpace calls repositories. And those are sort of different silos. So Matthew is in charge of the university archive, so he's got his own repository. And I'm more responsible for the general special collections, so I've got a repository. Then we also have one just where we have students working, so they're not working in the public access aspect, but so they can work in that. And then a few other people have created other testing repositories. And with almost everything, whether it's a repository, overall collection record, or a file, you can choose if you want it published or not published. And so while we enter our location data in our records, we don't want that published. So we just always click that off when we're getting ready to publish an EAD or ready for access. So next page. So my favorite feature is the public user interface. We didn't use it at first, but we are now, and it's becoming more and more discoverable. And I always say that my biggest kick is when users find material through that interface, because we put so much time and effort into creating a really detailed finding aid. And when they find it, it's just, it makes all that work worth it. So now this is not a frustration, it's sort of just an aspect of the program, is that digital images are not stored in ArchiveSpace. It is not a storage application. So the digital material has to be stored somewhere else on another server or otherwise available. So ArchiveSpace is essentially pointing or directing you to that digital material. So the ArchiveSpace will create a link in the record, and you can just click on that and it will take you to wherever the material is. So, and then we have we'll have like digital content available, and so you can see that. So we link to Digital Commons, and then Digital Commons also links back to us, so it's a two-way street. And then we also generate a MARC record, post it to OCLC, and then export it to our library through Sierra into URSIS catalog. There's a lot of steps provided, many points of access. And if you decide to change something, then you have to change it in 5 different places. So that's not always fun. But when users find our material, it makes it all worth it. So I think maybe another slide. Just various, looks at what the interface looks like. So this is an accession record, and with the accession record, once you decide to create a record, you can what they call spawn a resource record, and then I'll take the information in this record and create a catalog record. And then we also can rate our if it's a high priority or low priority, so we can sort of figure out what our workflow is going to be depending on what is high, what people are begging for. We do not make our accession records public. Some places do. We've decided against it. Next page. This is what the public interface looks like. Now, we have done some customization with the help of Lyrasis. For instance, we put our logo on it, and we did a little bit of explanation on how to search the database. Basically, you can use keyword, and you can decide if you want to what repository you want to look at, what kind of record you want to look at. Do you want to use, do you want to look at people, or do you want to look at a archival object, or do you want to look at a collection? So, or you can just search keyword. It is Boolean, so you can add more lines if you want to. Next page. So this is results for Gardener. You can see it shows you all the ones that come up. And over on the right here, you can see some of the filters that you can apply if you want to. Across the top, in the middle, about the top third here, you can see the different aspects that we have activated. Like I said, we don't share accessions, so we took it off here. But the different repositories that we have that are publicly available are collections, digital objects, which is the digital material pointers, subjects, and agents. So I think it works, pretty well. Next page. Once you do decide that you have a collection you want to look at, you can click on it and it gives you all the usual information you would find in a finding aid. And over on the right are hyperlinks to the different series, folders, digital material if there is any. So you can click on that and expand it and see what you're looking. There is a request feature, but we haven't used it because it tends to generate a lot of spam. But this allows people to look at a finding, to look at the material and say, instead of saying, I want to see the Edith Gardner papers, we're like, well, that's however many boxes, and could you maybe narrow it down a little bit, because we store things in our offsite material, our offsite building, and it needs to go over to the library. So we want to be able to kind of drill down and say, oh, you just want that one folder, okay? So that allows people to actually dig down and look at what's available. Next page. And it's on to Cipperly, and I'll be available for questions at the end.
Great, thank you, Beth. Yeah, as Beth said, add any questions that you have for either Beth or Cipperly into chat, or unmute yourselves at the end of Cipperly's presentation. So next up is Cipperly Good, who is curator of maritime history at the Penobscot Marine Museum in Searsport. Cipperly will be presenting on the collection management tool Past Perfect. Thank you, Cipperly.
Thank you. So I didn't have as much under the hood as Beth did, so I've just put a link in the chat if you want to see what's under the hood. So next slide. So Past Perfect is a collections management system. It allows you to catalog your objects, photos, archives, and library. It also allows the registrar to have their tools, so accessions, incoming, outgoing loans, deaccessioning, temporary custody receipts, and to track your exhibits. So that's a really helpful feature. And then you can use it for development. We don't here at the museum, but that is something that it offers. Next. The pricing, as you can see, there's a flat fee for the software with additional costs for annual hosting, the support services, the online database, and any upgrades you want to do. If you're a member of AASLH, then there's a discount for that. So that's really helpful. Next slide. How easy is it to use? I would say Past Perfect has a very responsive help center, and the trainings available from the vendor. I think that's its strong point, is that they're going to guide you through really responsive. Of course, you have to, there's a service fee, but I'd say it's highly worth it. And they really hold your hand. And it's suitable for a wide range of users, from the local historical society to mid-sized museums. And as you see from the 2010 meeting minutes for the Maine Historic Records Advisory Board, back then they were giving grants to various small repositories to get Past Perfect. And so you'll find Past Perfect is, back then you could get a grant to acquire it. They had training sessions. So Maine, you'll see it in a lot of Maine repositories because it was highly encouraged. So I would say there's a good, strong support network of your peers using Past Perfect. Next. Another great feature, as it's really easy to train your volunteers to use the system, and it's really hard to mess up. So as you can see, are you sure you want to delete this message or this record? And you have to click yes. And when you close out, it reminds you to back up your data. You can see I'm horrible at that. The last time I did it was, I did it in 2022. So not so bad, but so that's really helpful. You can have security features so that the volunteer cataloger can't see the accession records or the how much it costs or the location. So you can limit who can see what on the back end. And you have to click the button to edit, and you have to click the button to save. And so it's not, you can't have a random hit the keyboard and change a record. You really have to be intentional about, do you want to change this record? So I'd say it's really good at just making sure the mistakes are really minimal. And if somehow you do mess up, then you can go back to restore a backup. And it allows you to re-index to say, yep, all the data is the way we want it. You can track which volunteer or cataloger has changed the data, so you can track your volunteers and are they doing what you asked them to do. So I'd say that's really strong. Next. My favorite feature is that it allows you to create lists. So if you're putting together an exhibit, you're able to tag a lot of different things, make a list. If you want to do a global update for the data, it's helpful for that. Or you want to give a talk, you can gather your images and your archival items for that. So that's a really good feature. Next, biggest frustration. So here at Penobscot Marine Museum, we're looking to upgrade. We're looking for a new software because we've sort of outgrown Past Perfect. Our photo archive, I think we're up to thousands of images, so it's really slowing down Past Perfect. To do a search, you have to wait a minute or so for your results to come back. This is their online portal. Our photo archives would love to be able to have people click on the record and put it in their shopping cart, and that's not possible. Past Perfect's not in the game to sell your collections, reproductions of your collections, and it doesn't play well with others. So it's a proprietary software, so it's not like you can just download. You'd have to download, I guess, to Excel and upload it to Square or whatever you want to use. But it's really hard. It doesn't play well with others, I guess. And they've got a really strong product for entry-level museums. And so they're not looking and spending the development dollars to have more bells and whistles or customizable content. So kind of frustrated with that. Beth and I have numerous talks about the archive side of Past Perfect, It lacks a lot of the archival tools people need, like creating finding aids with an EAD. So if you're primarily archival, then maybe this isn't the software for you. But if, like us, you've got an object collection, a photo collection, archives collection, and you can also do your library, then it's got all those fields ready to use. Is that my last slide? Yep.
Great, thank you, Cipperly.
Yep.
So we do have a couple of questions that have come into the chat. I'm just going to scroll up for one of them. This one's for you, Beth. What type of hardware is required for ArchiveSpace? One server?
Okay, well, ArchiveSpace is web-based, so our backup data is hosted by Lyrasis on their servers. So that is if you're a member, they're going to take care of that. However, because the digital objects are not stored in ArchiveSpace, you do need to have a server probably to store things like that. But as long as you've got a host, hosted service, then you don't really need to do anything beyond that. Also, being web-based means it's easy to work from home using it.
Definitely. Thanks, Beth. And this is kind of a big question, maybe it might need to go offline, but this is from Paul. Could either of you speak to the difference between archival collection cataloging and museum object cataloging, and how that might influence choosing a collection management system?
I'll start simply if you want.
Okay.
I would say it depends on what your collection is. ArchiveSpace doesn't do objects well. So if you've got a museum collection, you're probably going to want to go with Past Perfect. However, if you have an archival collection and you want to be able to generate EAG records and MARC records, and you're not doing anything with museum type objects, you might want to go with ArchiveSpace because those things are generated within the system.
Yeah, I'd say objects cataloging, you catalog at the item level, and archives you catalog at the collection level.
Yeah, you can decide how far down you want to drill, but generally we're not cataloging at the item level.
Yeah.
Or we'd be here all day.
And this one is for you, Cipperly. It is is internet required for Past Perfect, or can you build your own network and use it locally only?
So Past Perfect has a web-only edition, which we do not use because I'm afraid I would lose internet. And I guess it's become more reliable, so I need to give that up. But we use the desktop version. So ours, you can have a single user, or you can have hosted on a server so that multiple people can connect to it. But it was totally made for the one cataloging computer or laptop in a historical society.
Thanks, Cipperly. And another question's just come through for you. Will Past Perfect make your migration to a new platform relatively easy, or do you dread the switch?
I think enough people have switched over from Past Perfect to another system that it's not horrible. And one of the systems we're looking at doesn't seem to have the registrar tools. So I would say that Past Perfect is a great workhorse for just doing what you need done. It doesn't have bells and whistles, but you can download everything to an Excel spreadsheet, and they would use that to upload to the new system, it seems like. And enough, we've heard from other users in other systems that you can make it happen with a little bit of data cleanup, but
Maybe that's an idea for a follow-up presentation in the future, Cipperly, to see how it went.
Yeah, I still haven't found something I'm happy with. So,
Okay, great. Well, thank you both again for your presentations. And again, if you do think of other questions for both those two presenters and any of our presenters today, will be time at the end for additional questions and comments. So our final two presenters will be covering tools for publishing digital content online to make it accessible for users around the world. We're going to be starting with Paul Fuller, who's Digital Projects Associate at the University of Southern Maine, and Paul is going to be covering the Digital Commons repository. Thank you, Paul.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, so as I said, I'm going to be talking about Digital Commons. So you can go to the next slide. So kind of just to start off with, I guess, Digital Commons is an institutional repository, which I don't know about all of you, but I didn't know what those two words meant when I first came across them. Basically, an institutional repository, an IR, is just a place to generally publish scholarship, to publish things produced by an institution. So, a lot of places, a lot of universities will be publishing, research papers, journal articles, if they're the publisher of a, scholarly journal, things like dissertations, theses, but then also, kind of any of the things that go along with that type of scholarship, data sets, poster presentations, anything that is kind of scholarly, could be, and is a digital file, could be published to an IR. It just kind of depends on what type of institution you are. And of course, the big thing that probably matters to everybody here is cultural heritage objects or digital assets, things, like historic newspapers that you digitized, photo albums, any town reports that may be kind of just kicking around underneath desks and things like that. And then even beyond that into like videos about your collections that have, that you've published, or, recordings of town meetings or anything, and even like recordings of oral history interviews. All those kinds of things can be published to an institutional repository, which helps with discoverability, which is kind of the big key. So yeah, next slide, please. So here at USM, we use Digital Commons to publish scholarship kind of at all levels of the university. We have, different research institutes here, and we publish their reports. We also have things from different academic departments, kind of more, I guess, traditionally scholarly type things, but also things like the arts and theater departments. We have digitized theater posters from last 20 or 30 years, which are really cool to look at, and I think really useful visual artifacts that are good to share online. And then of course the really big thing that actually is kind of my focus is the specialized collections, which is a kind of annoying localism here at USM, because we have 3 different special collections, one of which is named Special Collections, the Franco-American Collection and the Ocean Library, which all 3 of those groups are represented on our Digital Commons instance. Next slide. And so this is kind of what it looks like. It's not terribly exciting to look at on the front page, but it's the details that make it stand out. So this is just the special collections kind of homepage, and obviously it's just a static screenshot, but on the actual website, you can scroll down and see all kinds of links to things and different organizations and stuff. Next slide. And the really kind of nice thing about it is that it offers different ways of viewing things, different ways of viewing different types of objects. So just these are 2 different objects that I have. On the left is a newspaper that's been digitized and combined into a PDF. You can download the full PDF, and then also, if I had been smart and thought a little bit more as I did this screen capture, I would have scrolled down further in the page because there's an embedded PDF viewer on there. So folks don't even need to download it. because as you can see, 60 megabytes is not small for a lot of folks. So being able to just see it online is pretty great. And then a different type of item, just I guess you could call it a map, the bird's eye view of Maine, which some folks here, probably your institutions, contributed to this exhibit. It's just a built-in image viewer, and these all have different kind of types of metadata associated with them, and it's all there to be seen, which is very helpful. So next slide. And yeah, so that's Digital Commons is really great. We, for the most part, really like it. But I will say it is not something that you're going to go out on your own probably and just kind of buy a subscription to, because it is exorbitantly expensive, unless you are, even if you're at an institution like an academic library, it's still like tens of thousands of dollars a year for a bpress subscription, which is ridiculous. But thankfully you don't have to, because Maine State Library does for you. And there's the Digital Maine repository, which is Digital Maine is an instance of Digital Commons, and it's a partnership of the Maine State Library, Maine State Archives, and you, and me, and everybody else here in Maine who contributes to it. Next slide. So, you can kind of see, just again, little screenshot, there's all kinds of stuff that you can go take a look at Digital Maine, which is great. And then the most important thing would be the community collections. Next slide. Which is community collections are organized by town. So you can kind of go through and see if anybody in your area has uploaded anything to it. If not, I'd say if you have digitized objects pertaining to your town's history, go for it. Get in touch with Maine State Library. Get your items up there. Newspapers, old books that are in the public domain, videos, photographs, whatever ephemera that you have kicking around that you've digitized, or even things that you haven't digitized, you can reach out to the Maine State Archives and have them help out, or Maine State Library and have them help out. Next slide, please. Because the big upside is that it's free. Again, it's free through Digital Maine. You don't need to pay anything. It makes your items much more discoverable, as long as you have good metadata, which is required for anything. They do also have some great usage statistics. You can kind of see page hits and downloads, which is really fun and helpful. And also, the Maine State Library does have scanners, and actually I don't know all of the stuff that they have, but they have equipment that you can use to digitize their items. They'll help train you on it, or they may even be able to do some of it for you. But they're very approachable and very, very friendly. Next slide. Downside, it's not really customizable. It's also, the backend is not super user-friendly. Really was, very much designed as a place to publish PDFs of, kind of like scholarly reports and scholarly articles. So that's kind of the main design features for it, but it does work. We are able to put our, newspapers and photographs and whatever else on there. But, there are other types of digital asset management systems that exist and, might be worth checking out if you're not happy with Digital Commons. But that said, next slide. I think you should be happy to check out Digital Commons. And if you want to work with Digital Maine, reach out to the State Library. Kimberly Clark and Adam Fisher are folks you can reach out to. They'll, I would imagine, be very happy to talk to you. And yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Paul. And again, we'll get to questions after our next presenter, who will presenting on an alternative option, perhaps to Digital Commons. So Hannah Stevens, archivist at the College of the Atlantic in Bar Harbor, will be up next, and she's going to be covering the tool Omeka. And let me just go to your slide, Hannah. Great, take it away, Hannah.
Cool. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. So yes, I'll be covering Omeka, and this is their logo, which is pretty cool. Next slide, please. So what is Omeka? So this is something that's been around since 2008, and it's an open source web-based platform for sharing digital collections and exhibits. And there are 3 options for using Omeka. There's Omeka S and Omeka Classic and Omeka.net. Next slide. So these relate to how much it costs. Omeka S and Omeka Classic are free, yay, but they require installation and hosting know-how. So akin to some of the other options we've heard about today, this involves downloading the program and running it on your own server, or knowing how to do that and who to ask. And those also require resources and money. So even though it's free, there's a caveat that you need a little bit of skill. However, there's another option. Omeka.net is a hosted service through Omeka, and they've got a 4-tier pricing structure starting at $35 a year all the way up to $1,000. So it's not going to break the budget for $35. That's not terrible. And you get limited amount of storage. So there are some issues there. Next slide, please. So ease of use. This program was designed to be super easy to use for non-tech savvy people. And I can say I work with a lot of people in the community I'm in that use it, and a lot of people that have no tech experience, and they can navigate it pretty well. So I think it's doing okay. Omeka uses Dublin core fields, and so that is the initiative developed to standardize data about digital objects. And what's really nice is each field, one of my screenshots here shows you, has a description of how to use that field according to the Dublin core standard, which is really nice. So you don't have to know it from scratch. Omeka can handle just about any type of file. Our common ones, JPEGs, MOV, which is MOV and MP4, which are video files, MP3, which is an audio file. You could even upload a PowerPoint presentation, waves, text, TIFF. So it can handle a lot. And the other cool thing is there's a really strong community of documentation and support for either the Omeka.net or the self-administered ones. In Omeka.net, at the bottom of each page, when you're in it using it, there's a help button that stays right there. So there are lengthy documentations, there's training videos. Because it's open source, there's tons of people that are working on this to develop it more that you can talk to. So next slide, please. Favorite feature. My favorite feature is the plugin tool. And so this screenshot is of the Maine Contemporary Archives plugins, which I think we've got one of the higher tiered Omeka.net sites, but they do come with a certain fixed amount. But like if you're administering it yourself, you have access to hundreds of them. And so these are developed to extend the basic functionality of Omeka. And so that's for things like you can turn on a web builder function, digital exhibit builder, links that then allow visitors of your site to share things via social media. Some of the Maine Contemporary Archives partners, this is what Maine Contemporary Archives is using to host our sites that Matthew mentioned at the beginning. And some people have turned on things like, what is it, the contributor plugin. So someone could actually submit an digital object to a collection. There's Library of Congress Suggest plugins, which is great for helping you with your subject and authority vocabularies. So those are really cool. And they're really easy. You just install or deactivate, and it's all within one button that you click on your site. All right, next. So my biggest frustration with Omeka, and probably a lot of programs, is that they're very specialized. So this is only meant for sharing digital collections and exhibits. It's not meant to be a content management system. As much as I tried to make it work that way, it just doesn't. You can't host finding aids in it easily. So what I've done, and I've got 2 different screenshots here because I'm going to talk about another part of how I use Omeka, but we've got our Bangor Public Library Omeka site, and then mine that I call the digital collections. And really, they're very basic. You're either looking at items or collections. And so I made a link right to my finding aids. And because I have a very tiny budget with a very tiny collection, I just use Google Drive to host my finding aids. So I linked right to them. So that's that. Next slide. So I'm going to quickly talk about Omeka and the digital archive, because this probably has been confusing some people out there who have heard about this. So George Sewells, who is a local MDI area software developer and happens to be a trustee at the Southwest Harbor Public Library, took Omeka as the foundation and developed this really cool archive relational model, and now what we're calling the digital archive software that this group, the History Trust that I'm part of, are using. And basically what he's done is make really cool plugins and some other features that it's kind of like we're using the omeka.net site. So it's hosted for us, but it's way more powerful. And the digital archive allows for one search box that searches all of our sites at once. So any of us member institutions, so the contributor screenshot that I took over on the left or right side there, everybody highlighted in green is a member of the History Trust, which is a nonprofit consortium here on MDI that provides members access to collections-related resources, professional development opportunities, and we collaborate on shared exhibits, and we raise money to pay for the hosting and administration of this digital archive software for our members. So it's kind of similar to what the MCA is doing. We just happened to find this local resource. So as a user of the digital archive, you're searching numerous collections in one search box. And so that is a feature that is not available through Omeka in any other way. So as far as the contributors, we've got 3 people that aren't part of the History Trust group, but they're still using digital archive. But anybody who's going to go search on our site will be able to access their content as well as History Trust members' content. So it's not like there's nothing's bad about not being a partner or whatever. It's if you're a partner or a part of the History Trust, the costs to administer this program are paid for, otherwise it's out of pocket. But we're all benefiting from the shared resources and ability to reach our users better. So that's it. I went really quick because I know we're really tight on time, and I'll pop all these links. Next slide, Matthew. It's just a little wrap up here, and I'll post, I have some links to the various things I've talked about here. Oh, they didn't work. But thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. I think a couple of folks put some of those links in.
Oh, great.
A couple of them up. So yeah.
I was trying to do it all at once. But.
Yeah, it's hard to do both things at once. So just scrolling up, any questions for either Hannah or Paul? Get some of those. So I think there was a question that might have been answered by Gretchen, that books can be digitized even if they are not in public domain, just need to get permission from the publisher or author. Is the post, one question that's just come in from Ken is the posted material downloadable? What about copyright restrictions? I guess that could go to both of you, in fact.
Yeah, on ours, each record has the right statement that connects to rightstatement.org. So, I mean, they could technically download something and use it in an inappropriate way. But what I've done is, at least with our images, they're pretty low quality. But I'm also pretty careful when I'm putting stuff out there. But yeah, I guess it can happen with any of our digital stuff. It's pretty easy to take things.
Yeah, I mean, on Digital Commons, you can, there's a setting if something is, if you are allowing people to download the the native file or not. So it's always best to only put something out on the internet completely if you are sure that you want other people to have access to it. A lot of the items that we're going to be dealing with are probably in the public domain anyways. So that's good. And for a lot of these, for a lot of us, this nonprofit educational institutions, we can rely on fair use for a fair bit of our stuff. but it's not a blanket exemption. So you do need to be wary of copyright, and yeah, exactly, and have a takedown policy for sure. You know, if someone reaches out to you and says, "Hey, why do you have, you know, those pictures that I took on there? I don't want you to have those up there." You know, respect that. Take them down. So yeah.
Great, thank you both. Any other questions for Hannah and Paul? So just again, a big thank you to all of today's presenters. We still do have a good amount of time left for any remaining questions to any of the presenters that you've heard from today about the tools you've heard, or any of the tools that you might use yourselves if you want to comment on any of those. I would also welcome any suggestions for subjects that you want to cover at future professional development events like this one. And we're always looking for new ideas for featuring subjects. So any of those questions with the presenters or ideas for future subjects are most welcome for these remaining few minutes.